Thar, the shadow people. Have you ever caught something flickering at the corner of your eye, only to turn around and see nothing? Today, we're diving into a chilling phenomenon that has left many people uneasy. The shadow people. Is it just a trick of the mind, or is there something lurking in the darkness? Let's find out together. Don't forget to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you never miss another mysterious story. A mystery lurking in the darkness. Have you ever had the feeling that something was watching you just beyond your line of sight? A fleeting shadow, a presence just out of reach. But when you turn to look, there's only silence, only emptiness. I used to think it was nothing more than an illusion, a trick played by a tired mind at the end of a long day. But then I realized I wasn't the only one who had felt it. It all began one late night as I sat alone in my dimly lit room, the only source of light being the faint glow of my desk lamp. A strange unease settled in, a sensation I couldn't quite explain. I kept noticing something, a blur at the edge of my vision, moving just out of reach. My heart pounded faster, my palms damp with sweat. Taking a deep breath, I reassured myself that it was only the shifting shadows of the trees outside my window. And then, I saw it. A vague figure, standing still in the darkness, as if waiting for something. I wasn't afraid, not at first. Instead, a strange sense of familiarity washed over me, as though there was an invisible thread connecting me to this entity. A quiet sympathy settled in my chest. What if it wasn't something to fear, but something lost? A wandering soul trapped between two worlds, searching for what it had lost. And then, in the blink of an eye, it was gone, leaving behind an inexplicable sense of longing. I didn't know what I was hoping for. A sign, an explanation, or just confirmation that it had truly been there. Maybe that moment planted a quiet hope in me. If such entities exist, could it mean that one day we might finally find answers about the world beyond? I soon realized I wasn't alone in this experience. Thousands, maybe even millions of people have seen the shadow people, asking themselves the same questions I did. Perhaps we are not as isolated in this world as we think. Perhaps, somewhere in the darkness, there are unseen threads that connect us to each other, and to the mysteries that science has yet to explain. Have you ever seen a shadow flicker in the night, just for a moment, only to find nothing there when you turn to look? Share your story in the comments. Who knows? Maybe together we can uncover another piece of this mystery. There are things we see but cannot explain, moments we feel yet cannot grasp. I used to believe that the shadows slipping past my vision were nothing more than illusions, tricks of a weary mind. But after this experience, I'm no longer so sure. That night, the air in my room felt thick with an eerie silence. The wall clock ticked slowly, each second dragging on as if time itself had stretched into eternity. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes heavy with exhaustion. And then, out of the corner of my eye, a faint shadow appeared. I snapped my head toward it, but there was nothing. A deep unease crept into my mind, a chilling sensation that someone, or something was standing in the darkness, silently watching me. I know I'm not the only one who has felt this. Many people have told similar stories, fleeting figures vanishing as soon as they're noticed. Some dismiss them as mere tricks of the imagination, but others believe they are real, signs of an actual presence. I don't know what to believe, but I do know that the feeling was too real to ignore. I tried to push aside my fear, to convince myself it was nothing, but the sensation of being watched only grew stronger. It wasn't menacing, not exactly. It felt more like someone searching for a connection, as if they had once been part of this world but had been forgotten, leaving behind nothing but a shadow. And suddenly, an unexpected emotion rose in me. Empathy. If they were once human, if they once lived, how lonely must it be to exist only as a fading trace, unseen and unheard? Then a realization struck me. If we can sense them, can they sense us too? Is there a thin, fragile boundary between two worlds, where lost souls still wander, seeking someone who can see them? For a fleeting moment, hope flickered within me. Perhaps they are not just empty shadows. Perhaps they are souls still searching for something left unfinished. And then, the most unexpected moment of all. As I stood up to turn off the light, the shadow appeared again. But this time, it did not vanish right away. I could see it more clearly, a faint, hazy figure standing still in the corner of my room. My heart pounded, not in fear, but in confusion. What should I do? Should I run? Should I try to speak to it? Before I could decide, the shadow slowly faded, melting back into the darkness, leaving me with more questions than answers. A deep sense of regret washed over me. I didn't know what I had missed, but there was an indescribable emptiness in my chest. Had I lost my chance to understand that presence? Had I been too slow to grasp that fleeting moment? But I still hold on to the belief that it wasn't the last time. If a connection truly exists, then one day, I will find the answer. Maybe I am not alone in this journey, for many others have experienced something similar. Their stories, their feelings, each one a piece of a greater mystery. And if you too have had such an experience, share it. Perhaps between our stories we might uncover a deeper connection. Perhaps one day we won't just see them in the darkness. We will understand who they really are. The eyes in the dark. There are things in this world we cannot see clearly, yet somehow we can feel them. Sometimes it's the weight of an unseen gaze from afar, a sudden chill in the dead of night, or simply the unshakable sense that someone is standing beside us, even when no one is there. I never believed in the supernatural, not until I lived through a moment I will never forget. I still remember that night. The sky was pitch black, and the only light came from the street lamp outside, casting long, distorted shadows on my wall. I sat quietly at my desk, trying to focus on the book in front of me. Yet an unsettling feeling crept over me. It was faint at first, easy to dismiss. But the longer I sat there, the stronger it grew. It felt like someone else was in the room with me. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't. Slowly, cautiously, I turned my head, and for the briefest moment, I saw it. A shadowy figure standing in the corner of the room. And then, in the blink of an eye, it was gone. My heart pounded, not out of fear, but from an unexplainable curiosity. I was not alone in that space. Or rather, I did not feel alone. Though I couldn't see it clearly, I could sense its presence. A strange sense of empathy stirred within me. If it truly existed, perhaps it was searching for something, just like I was. In the days that followed, I became more aware of its presence. It was no longer a fleeting shadow disappearing as soon as I noticed it. Instead, it lingered, always there, silently watching. While most would have been terrified, I felt an inexplicable connection. Maybe it had once been human, once lived, loved, and suffered. But now it was nothing more than a shadow, trapped between two worlds. Then, the most unexpected moment arrived. That night, as I sat alone in the silent room, a sudden chill swept over the back of my neck, sending shivers down my spine. Slowly, I lifted my gaze, and this time, it didn't vanish. Right in front of me, a faint figure stood still. It was no longer just a passing shadow, but a tangible presence. I could feel the deep sorrow radiating from it, as if it wanted to say something, but couldn't. I wanted to ask. I wanted to know who or what it was. But before I could utter a word, it faded away, dissolving into the darkness. A wave of regret filled me. Had I lost my only chance to understand it? And yet, I wasn't afraid. Instead, a strange hope flickered within me. If it could appear, then perhaps it could communicate. Maybe it wasn't just an empty entity, but a soul waiting for someone to understand it. Since that night, I have not seen it again. But I know, somewhere in the shadows, it still lingers. I may never touch it, never speak to it, but I can feel its presence. An invisible connection, strong yet silent. Perhaps in this world there are many others like me. People who have felt something they cannot explain. We are not alone. Whether human or unseen entities, we are all bound by threads we have yet to fully comprehend. So, what about you? Have you ever felt the presence of something beyond your understanding? If so, share your story. Who knows? Between our experiences, we might uncover an answer that has long been hidden in the darkness. Some things pass through our lives, leaving behind a strange imprint we can never forget. A dream left unfinished, a fleeting encounter, or a presence unseen, yet deeply etched into our minds. I never thought I would experience something like that. Until one night. That night, the air was cool, the silence so profound that I could hear my own breathing. I sat in my room, a dim desk lamp casting a faint glow over the open book before me. Everything seemed ordinary until I felt something different. A shadow, a small, flickering presence at the corner of the room. At first, I dismissed it as exhaustion playing tricks on me, but when I lifted my head, I saw it. A small figure, barely reaching my chest, standing quietly in the darkness. It didn't move. It had no clear shape, just a hazy, undefined form. My heart pounded, but not from fear. Instead, I felt curiosity. I didn't feel threatened. Instead, an unusual sense of empathy crept into my soul. It didn't seem dangerous. It wasn't trying to frighten me. It simply stood there, a lonely presence in the night. I don't know how long I sat there, frozen in place, only aware that time itself seemed to stand still. I wanted to move closer, to see it more clearly. But with a single blink, the shadow vanished into the air. A wave of disappointment washed over me. Had I just lost my one chance to understand it? From that day on, I paid more attention. On quiet nights, I could still feel its presence. It didn't appear often, but I knew. It was still there. A small hope flickered inside me. Perhaps it wasn't just an empty entity, but a soul searching for something. One night, I decided to try something different. I placed a small notebook on my desk, leaving a blank page open, hoping that if it truly had some awareness of this world, it might leave a sign. The night passed in quiet anticipation, and the next morning, my heart skipped a beat when I saw it. A faint, smudged mark, like the stroke of a pencil. It wasn't a letter, nor a clear drawing, but it was something. Shock filled me. It was real, and it wanted to communicate in its own way. I couldn't explain it with science or logic. But deep inside, I understood one thing. There is an invisible connection between us all. Perhaps we are never truly alone in this world. Perhaps there are other beings that exist beside us. Unseen, yet always there. And if one day you feel an unexpected chill, catch a fleeting shadow from the corner of your eye, pause and listen. Somewhere in the darkness, a soul might be waiting for you to acknowledge it. There are things in life we cannot explain, yet we still feel their presence. A sudden chill in a warm room, a fleeting shadow in the corner of our vision, or simply the eerie sense that someone is standing behind us, despite knowing we are alone. At first, I dismissed it as mere imagination, but when it happened again and again, I started to wonder, was something, or someone trying to reach me. I remember that night vividly. The world outside was silent, the only light coming from a street lamp casting faint streaks onto my wall. I sat on my bed, staring at my phone screen, though my mind drifted elsewhere. A strange unease settled over me. Not fear, but anticipation. As if, deep down, I was waiting for something to happen. Then, just as I was about to put my phone down, I heard it. A whisper. I froze, my heart pounding. I strained to listen, but there was nothing else. Maybe it was just the wind outside, or a muffled sound from the apartment next door. But as soon as I reached for the light switch, the whisper came again, clearer this time. A faint voice, calling my name. My breath hitched. A part of me wanted to run out of the room, but another part, stronger, more curious, urged me to stay. I wasn't scared. Strangely, the voice felt familiar, like I had heard it before. Summoning my courage, I spoke, though I wasn't sure who I was speaking to. "Who's there?" Silence. But the air around me changed. The room felt heavier, charged with something unseen. I turned my head, slowly, and that's when I saw it. A shadow, standing by my closet. It had no distinct shape, yet I felt its gaze locked onto me. Fear crept up my spine, but so did something else. Empathy. I didn't know who it was, or where it came from, but I felt its sorrow. Perhaps it had once been human. Once had memories, emotions, dreams. But now it was nothing more than a silent shadow in the dark, reaching out for something. I lifted my hand slightly, an invitation. But in that very moment, the shadow began to fade. I wanted to say something, to keep it there. But before I could, it was gone, and a strange emptiness settled within me. Had I just lost something? Someone I never even knew existed? I sat there for a long time, staring at the space where it had stood, wondering if it would ever return. I never told anyone about that night, because I knew they wouldn't believe me. But ever since, I haven't seen the shadow again. Only on quiet nights, I still feel a soft warmth pass by my side, as if it's still there, still watching, still waiting. Maybe one day I'll understand what it was. Maybe I'll find out who it used to be, why it appeared to me. But no matter what, I believe that between us, a connection was made, a silent bond that stretches beyond the two worlds. So, what about you? Have you ever had a moment like this? If you have, share your story, because maybe, just maybe, we are not alone. There are stories people only dare to tell once they've left a place far behind, when time has softened the lingering fear. But for me, even after all these years, that memory remains as vivid as if it happened yesterday. A memory I wish I had never lived through. It all started that winter. I moved into an old apartment on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't very spacious, but it was cozy enough, and most importantly, the rent was cheap. The first time I stepped inside, I felt something was off. Not because of the damp air or the worn-out furniture, but because of an unshakable feeling, as if someone was watching me. I quickly dismissed the thought. There was nothing here but me. It was just my imagination. Everything seemed normal until one night when I discovered a large mirror in the bedroom, hidden beneath a red cloth. I didn't recall seeing it when I first moved in, but I was certain I had never touched it before. Curiosity got the better of me, and I slowly pulled the cloth away. The mirror was old, its wooden frame carved with strange, intricate patterns. The glass was cloudy, as if no one had looked into it for years. I reached out and brushed my fingers against the surface. A chill spread through my fingertips, sending a shiver down my spine. And then, I saw it. In the mirror, reflected behind me, stood a figure. I spun around instantly, nothing. But when I turned back to the mirror, it was still there. I froze in place. It wasn't fully defined, just a tall, thin silhouette, its face obscured by shadows. I had no idea how long it had been there, or why I could see it only in the mirror. I tried to reassure myself. It was probably just an illusion caused by the light. But then, the figure moved. Slowly, it lifted its head, and that was when I saw the most horrifying thing of all. It was smiling. A twisted, unnatural grin stretching all the way to its ears, devoid of any joy. My heart pounded as I frantically threw the red cloth back over the mirror. The room fell silent once more, but I knew that from that moment on, I was no longer alone. In the days that followed, things only got worse. Every time I looked into a mirror, I felt something standing behind me. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I would hear whispers echoing through my room, faint, fragmented words that I couldn't understand. And then, one night, I woke up to an unbearable chill wrapping around my entire body. The room was silent, eerily so, but I knew something was wrong. The mirror. It was no longer covered. The red cloth lay crumpled on the floor. And in the mirror, it was there. This time, I saw it clearly. A woman, gaunt, disheveled hair cascading over most of her face. Her eyes were hollow, pitch black, like endless voids. She didn't move. She simply stood there, staring at me. But the most terrifying part was, my hand was raised in the mirror. Yet I hadn't moved an inch. A soft chuckle echoed through the room. Panic surged through me as I stumbled backward. But my reflection didn't follow. I was no longer me in the mirror. She was. Terror gripped my throat, strangling any scream I wanted to let out. I bolted from the room, ran out of the apartment, and never once looked back. The next morning, I returned with a few friends to gather my belongings. But when I opened the door, the only thing left in that empty room was the old mirror. And inside it was me, standing there, smiling that same twisted smile. I ran. I never returned. But ever since that night, every time I look into a mirror, I can't shake the feeling that my reflection is watching me. And sometimes, just sometimes, it smiles. Have you ever looked into a mirror and felt that something was off? Try staring a little longer. Who knows? Maybe something is staring back.